What if dogs could talk? Not just like Lassie, but like us. What if cows could articulate their opinions about the dairy industry, and chickens could describe the horrors of battery cages? This is a question that has kept me up at night since I first read the book Watership Down as a kid. And it's a scenario that fortunately, or unfortunately, scientists think is theoretically possible. In today's episode, we're going to talk about what would happen if animals were to suddenly evolve the ability to speak and demand their rights. So grab a tea, settle in, because this is going to be an interesting one. When most people imagine talking animals, they picture cute talking cats and dogs who can hold conversations with their owners. But I think it's more likely that if animals could suddenly talk, they wouldn't talk to their abusers. They would talk to us, the humans whose actions affect their lives the most. They would want to tell us how factory farming them for food is cruel. They would demand that we undo the damage we've done to their habitats, and they would probably want to know why we keep torturing them. But could they actually do that? Well, there have been several studies by scientists who believe that given enough time and motivation, many animals could learn to communicate with us in a human language. In 2019, a scientist proposed a way to teach pigs a language based on spoken words. The idea was that each sound would have a meaning in context, sort of like how babies learn language. The pig would hear the word outside when its human companion opens the door and goes outside. Over time, the pig would learn to associate the word with that action, and then eventually call out for the human to open the door itself. While that study hasn't yet been replicated, other scientists have demonstrated that pigs can learn the names of the things in their enclosure and even their own names. One clever girl named Hamlet learned to push a lever that gave her a treat after watching another pig do it 16 times. When she heard the word treat, she was much more likely to push the lever than when she heard the word toy. She also learned to push a different lever when she heard the word ham, and push a third lever when she heard the word ball. This shows that she understood those words had different meanings. The only thing standing between her and full-blown language was the ability to vocalize. And it's not just pigs. In 2020, a parrot learned to arrange blocks of wood into a custom keyboard in order to spell out specific words. This is very close to language, and it shows that animals are desperate to communicate with us. It also proves that humans are capable of communicating with animals. All we need to do is put in the work. Theoretically, if we really tried, we could teach any animal to talk, but that doesn't mean they'd want to. Even if a cow could learn to say, "I want some grass to eat," or "I don't want to go to slaughter," would it bother learning to do that? Cows don't get lonely, bored, or stressed. They live completely different lives from us. They have very different priorities. Maybe they wouldn't care about being able to talk to us at all, but let's say that every single species that currently suffers at the hands of humans suddenly found talking worth their while. The first thing they'd want is freedom. If you were a chicken, would you rather spend your life in a cage with 99 other chickens where you can't move around freely, preen your feathers, or roam outside? Or would you rather have a nice, comfortable cage with all the treats, but no freedom at all? Almost all chickens would choose the former, and rightfully so. But that means that many animals would be asking for their cages to be opened, their slaughterhouses to be torn down, and their forests to be replanted. So would anybody listen? Well, first, some religious groups might say that giving animals the ability to talk was a sin or a curse, a test from God to see if they would continue to worship Him despite the talking animals. Governments might try to crack down on the animals' newfound ability to speak, which would probably result in more people fighting for the animals' rights, perhaps even armed rebellions. We know that armed conflicts aren't uncommon in the animal kingdom, with male parrots killing other males to take over their territory. So it's possible that we would be in for a wild ride. If the governments didn't fight back too hard, we'd probably see many animals petitioning for citizenship and voting rights. There are already organizations like Non-Human Rights Project that are fighting for corporations and courts to recognize certain animals as persons, which would grant them many of the legal rights humans enjoy. If animals could talk, these groups would have a much easier job convincing us to take animals' rights seriously. After all, how could you deny a sentient being that has the capacity to plan for its own future and make decisions for itself the right to life and liberty? But that still leaves us with a big problem. If we consider animals to be people, then eating them becomes cannibalism. That might make a lot of people stop eating meat, but others might argue that it's okay to eat animals because they're less than human. But how could we justify that when they can articulate their intelligence and explain their feelings to us? Perhaps some people would argue that it's okay to eat animals because they don't have souls. But if that's the case, then why shouldn't we eat each other? Many people find it impossible to justify eating meat when they look an animal in the eye and realize that it feels pain and has emotions like they do. And scientists have discovered that some animals feel emotions like grief. Maybe instead of debating whether or not animals should have rights, we could start by listening to what they have to say. Animal activists have long been trying to convince people to see animals as individuals with thoughts, feelings, and needs. Having animals suddenly show up at town hall meetings to argue for their own rights would certainly get our attention. But here's where things get really complicated. If animals could talk, they'd want more than just the right to life and liberty. Pigs couldn't care less about the right to vote or run for office, but they would care about the right to not be tortured during their pregnancy, to give birth in peace, and to grow up without the constant fear of slaughter looming over them. Cows would want the right to roam free and graze instead of being stuck in dark pens with hundreds of other cows. Chickens would want the right to stretch their wings and fly instead of being stuck in cages stacked on top of each other. So if animals could suddenly talk, their demands would be all over the place and difficult to ignore. But how would we respond? Well, first off, farmers would be out of business. No farmer would want to hear that the product they're selling is sentient, has the capacity to suffer, and is counting down the days until it gets a chance to retaliate against its captors. But the truth is, many farmers already know this, and they still do it anyway. If animals could talk, McDonald's and Burger King wouldn't be serving beef and chicken anymore. But if they stopped serving meat, many people would stop eating there altogether. This would devastate the fast food industry and cause huge economic problems. The money that currently goes to farmers and slaughterhouses would disappear, and the economy would have to figure out what to do with it. The entire concept of eating meat is ingrained in many cultures, especially American culture. There are hundreds of cookbooks and TV shows dedicated to cooking meat, and people's jobs, homes, and social lives revolve around meat. If animals could talk and we suddenly stopped eating meat, there would be many unintended consequences, some good and some bad. Personally, I think the benefits would outweigh the drawbacks. If animals could talk and we listened to them, we would stop torturing them for food, clothing, or entertainment. And that would make the world a better place for both humans and animals. But let's be real. It's never going to happen. Scientists are working hard to understand how human language works so that we can help children who have trouble learning to talk. It would be a waste of everyone's time and resources to redirect that research towards talking animals. Besides, if animals could suddenly talk, they would be demanding so much that we wouldn't know what to do with them, much less teach them to speak. The only thing we would do is run for the hills. Even if we did try to teach animals to talk, it would take hundreds of years. And by then they would probably have evolved past our need for their products. So while I hope that one day animals will be able to tell us how cruel we are, I know that that day is not coming anytime soon.